I feel like I'm going back in time a little bit with this video topic, but I hope it's gonna be useful. Hey Spuds, it's Jamie, welcome back to another video, first video on the channel. I don't know, but welcome either way. I'm very glad to have you here for today's little video, which is a trans/transition related Q&A. I put out on Instagram, if you want to go follow me on Instagram, it's Jammidodger. Here, you can go follow me. I asked on Instagram a few days ago, hello, are there any trans or transition related questions you might have for me for a video that is upcoming? And
boy, did you ask some questions.
So today I'm here to answer those questions if you hadn't already got the drift of what this video might be about. And yeah, I just thought it was maybe nice to do a little trans help thing that wasn't memes or videos or reactions, and just kind of having a chat about some transition related topics, answering some questions and seeing if it can be useful at all. So yay. For context, for anyone who is new here, I am a 30-year-old trans man. I've been transitioning since I was 17. I am about 12 years on testosterone, coming up to 12 years post top surgery, and 6 and a bit years post metoidioplasty lower surgery. So I have been transitioning for a while. Hopefully I can just give some answers to these questions, and yeah, let's go. Honk honk to you too. I don't know if you heard that, somebody beeped their horn outside. Unexpected changes that happened that you never heard of before you were on T. Oh, I mean, I did a lot of research. I did a ton. The doctor told me what to expect. So there's kind of like not really much that surprised me, aside from like I smelt a lot worse than I thought I would. That sounds really grim. Just especially in those early days, like getting the balance right, finding new deodorant that worked for me, washing my t-shirts more frequently. It was a thing. A lot of things about your smell changes, like your body odor, your pee, like stuff smells different when you're on testosterone. And I was kind of aware of it, but not fully until it actually happened. And I was like, oh, this is a bit of a surprise, the amount that this is happening. Other things, maybe like truly learning, although people say it, it's like actually seeing it in practice, just how different people's timelines are and how different bodies react differently to the same hormone and the same level of the same hormone. It's like some people will get a beard like this in 6 months, and this is 12 years worth of growth and it's still filling in now. Oh yeah, that has actually made me think of another surprise change. I'll get back to that in a minute. And just like my voice dropped reasonably quickly, but a lot of other things took a while. Like my body fat redistribution was quite slow. My periods took longer to stop than I thought that they would. I saw everybody saying like they stop after 1 month. Like you have your first shot, or like you start taking testosterone and then
you never have one again.
And I still had it for quite a while, like nearly a year after I started T, until I got my levels right. And yeah, body hair was just a lot slower than I expected it to be. So I guess it's just like learning that everybody's different and that's okay. But the thing I remembered is about body hair as well. It just doesn't stop. Nobody told me it does. I have to trim my eyebrows now. I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have happened without testosterone. I have nose hairs that stick out my nostrils. I have eyebrow hairs that like go up to here if I don't trim them, and it looks, wow, it's impressive, but it tickles, so I get rid of it. And my shoulder hairs are just a graveyard of dead spider legs. It's ridiculous. I did not quite expect to carry on getting as hairy as I am still continuing to get. It is not slowing up. So maybe that's something for some people to look forward to. Yay. Did you still get misgendered in your first year taking hormones? I was quite fortunate with misgendering, where the main thing that even before I started testosterone was my voice. So for context, I'm quite tall. I'm just over 6 foot. And I always kind of, even before I started physically, like even before I started socially transitioning, like even before I came out, after I cut my hair short, I regularly got read as male and pronounced he, him and stuff like that, just naturally. So when I came out as trans and started my transition, that carried on. And the main time when I got misgendered was when I spoke. So I think a lot of the time people thought I was just like a teenage boy, which I guess at the time at 17, I was young still as well. So it was, nobody thought I looked particularly young, but I did look a little bit young. But it was my voice. And I'd say that that carried on for about the first 3 to 4 months on T. And then personally, from about 4 months on testosterone, I haven't been misgendered, other than people making mistakes because they're still shifting over, and people doing it deliberately because they're assholes. Everyone's timeline is different, and it's okay if it carries on. I know that it doesn't feel okay and it can feel really difficult to deal with, but testosterone can just take time to work. Did your name feel weird at first? Do you know what? Yeah, it did. And I don't know if people talk about this enough. Like, as exciting as it is, and as much as you want it to happen, and as much as a dead name / birth name can cause dysphoria, a new name feels weird. It's like, okay, I like this name, it feels right for me, but it feels really bizarre. And there can be a moment where you need to relearn and retrain your head that is now your name and the name that you respond to. Because there were, people would say it and it would take me a second to be like, yeah, that's me. It doesn't reflect anything badly on me. It doesn't make me less trans. It doesn't make it any less of the right thing for me to do. It's just breaking a habit. I got so used to hearing this name, and as much as it caused me discomfort, now hearing this name and being called Jamie, it did take time to get used to it. It really did. And it did feel a bit strange at first. And it felt like this combination of exciting and really cool to hear people like my parents using the name Jamie, and also a bit weird and a bit like, oh yeah, that's a thing now. So don't worry if it feels weird. Also, equally, don't worry if it feels perfectly natural straight away. Honestly, the biggest bit of advice that I'm probably going to repeat myself throughout this video is everybody is different, and there's no one way to be trans. There's no right or wrong way to do things. There's no right or wrong pace. It's all about you. So obviously take this advice, whether this is coming from my personal experience, but you can feel differently. Is it okay for someone who's trans FTM to wear dresses or clothes labeled as women's clothing? Absolutely. Of course it is. This is such a harmful trope that trans people need to be the epitome of stereotypical for their gender, that trans men have to be
the epitome of masculine.
And this can breed toxic masculinity, and it is a thing amongst the trans mass community, and that trans women have to be
the epitome of femininity.
And it's not the case. Your gender expression is completely separate from your gender identity. Being a trans man who wants to express femininely and wear clothing that is labeled as women's clothing, like dresses and skirts and high heels and things like that, they're not just for women. And it doesn't make you any less trans. It doesn't make you any less of a man to wear those clothes and express in that way. So of course, you wear whatever you feel most comfortable in and what makes you feel good and what you want to wear. It does not impact your gender at all. Cis men can wear women's clothing and it doesn't impact their gender. Cis women can wear men's clothing. I'm doing this because clothes are clothes that just arbitrarily separated in shops. Cis women can wear men's clothing and it doesn't make them any less of a woman. So trans women and trans men are no different. There are no, and there should absolutely not be, any extra rules for trans people in terms of gender expression for them to be trans enough or to be seen as their gender. You do you. What is the hardest thing to get used to when you start taking tea? The hardest thing to get used to. There's a couple that come to mind just because it's different. I would say with the surprised answer, the smell is one thing that can take a minute to get used to. It's interesting. Voice, I guess, that was an exciting thing, but at the same time, I went through this phase of properly being a squeaky chicken, and my voice was breaking, and it was very odd, and I didn't quite know how I felt, and I laughed about it, and I did find it funny, and I find it funny looking back on it.
It's breaking.
It definitely was an adjustment to relearn where my voice was coming from and the volume of my voice and the pitch of my voice and everything changing with my voice. There is also hair changes. Mine came in very slowly, but it's getting used to maintaining a beard, because when I was very excited about it, everybody was telling me, the men in my life with beards, they were you're gonna get really annoyed with it when it does eventually come in, because you're gonna have to maintain it and shape it and keep it neat and shave. If you want to be clean shaven all the time, that's gonna be a ball ache. Fortunately, I do not want to, nor do I need to be clean shaven all the time, but yeah, you have to trim it and maintain it. And I think it was just relearning things that had to now become part of my routine. But it's just going through puberty and relearning your body, to be honest. Do you ever wonder if men can tell the difference in stream pattern when you pee? Yeah, to be fair, I do actually think this. I do. I have no idea if there's any truth in it. So I didn't get urethral lengthening, so I don't stand to pee. I don't use a urinal. I will use a cubicle. The main time I feel awkward is if there's one stall and you're just kind of standing outside it and there's like a row of 3 urinals and you're like, are people gonna wonder why I'm not using them and I'm waiting here for half an hour for like the one dude who's taking a dump to finish? But you know, everybody poops, so it's okay. Sorry, I got foot cramp. Jesus, why have I got foot cramp filming a video? So that's normally the time when I feel most awkward in the men's. I am also a very socially anxious person who's very self-aware and self-conscious, so I feel like people pay more attention to me than they actually do. It's just my brain likes to tell me that's what's going on. In terms of pee stream, I don't sit fully on the toilet. I hover, so like I don't think anyone would hear, like it sounds like it's coming from a height, if you get my drift. The main thing that concerns me, and honestly, like there's so many sounds going on in a toilet, like the amount of farts I've heard, and then there's like hand dryers and taps. Like I really don't think people are standing outside the stall listening to you pee, but I can understand where the self-consciousness comes from. I have it as well. I'm not judging. The main thing I get self-conscious about is the toilet paper, because if you've only been in there very quickly and you use toilet paper, I'm like, is anyone going to question why I'm using toilet paper? And then I just kind of have to accept, all right, people just think I've done a really quick poop or I need to blow my nose or something. It's chill. Like, I think people pay far less attention to others than we think they do. But yeah, it is a concern I had. I feel like it's quite a funny one. It's not one I really thought of before I started using the men's. It's not ever something I thought of generally before I started using men's public toilets, like what a pee stream sounded like. But yeah, things sound a little bit different, I think. I mean, obviously they sound different. If somebody's standing and somebody's sitting, that sounds different. But aside from the height thing, I don't personally think there's a discernible difference that someone in a public toilet would necessarily pick up on. Unless it was like so silent you could hear a pin drop and someone had heard a lot of other people pee. How often do you think about your gender now? Very rarely. It's also particularly rare in instances of like being a trans man. I think about like being a man when certain topics come up, particularly to do with like male privilege and like speaking to my wife about things like that. It definitely comes up that my gender is man, but me being trans really only comes up in the context of like my job, to be honest, because I make videos online and I have a book and all of this stuff. That's like 95% of the context where me being trans comes up. The other 5% being personal feelings when shit things happens to the trans community, and it can be a bit upsetting to read about and not very fun. And then, you know, because I'm trans, I want to pay attention to it, and then that also though bleeds into my job because then I'll speak about it and all of this stuff. So it just like day-to-day life when there's not transphobia going on and I don't have to do anything for work, I don't think about it, except maybe when I pee and I have to use toilet roll. I had top surgery in May 2023. My scars are huge. How do I gain confidence shirtless? May 2023. So less than a year ago. For context, this is what my scars look like at 6 months post-op. So they were quite red. My scars stretched a lot. I personally would say that my scars are big. I don't know what the metric for scar size is, so I don't know if mine would be constituted by a person asking question as huge, but probably back at 6 months post-op, I'd have said I had huge top surgery scars. This was my chest at 1 year post-op, where my scars had faded a little bit, but were still quite visible. They were still quite big looking, and I didn't have very much chest hair. Now, this is my chest at like 11 and a bit years post-op, where my scars, obviously, once they stretched, they didn't shrink back, but they went from being this like red color to a pinky color to now mostly white, and they blend in very well, and I have a lot of chest hair that covers it. So I could completely relate to the question. When I was around like 9-10 months post-op, I felt like my scars were huge. I felt like they were really obvious. I felt self-conscious going shirtless in public. I loved it. It was so freeing, and I did do it at the beach, but it was mostly with like a lot of other people around me who knew me. So like I probably would have felt more uncomfortable if I was, say, alone at a busy swimming pool. I think there's always like confidence in numbers, right? And it feels like people are less likely to say something to you if you have a friendship group around you or family and whatnot. Personally, I've had no comments about my chest aside from a tattoo artist once, but he knew where they were from And so he was just asking me about it a little bit, and it wasn't rude or invasive. It was totally fine. I was sort of shirtless for the tattoo, so hence, yeah, I think give your body a little bit of time as well. And there are things you can do for your scars, not that you need to, but there are things you can do for your scars that help them fade, such as bio oil. But honestly, like 10 months post-op is very, very new still. So give your body time to carry on healing, and they will get less obvious with time. I hope that helped. Was the GRC application easy or tedious? Looking into it soon. For context, for those of you who don't know, GRC is a gender recognition certificate, and it's something that a trans person in the UK can apply for to change legal sex and like change sex on birth certificate, which then allows like you to update your tax records and get married as your legal gender and your legal sex. I think it's actually a very small minority of trans people in the UK actually have a GRC. There have been calls to reform the Gender Recognition Act to make it easier and bring in a more self-ID form for people to get a gender recognition certificate, but TAFs do not like that, so we are struggling to make that progress when, you know, it literally doesn't affect their lives. But it would be wonderful for trans people if the process was a bit easier. I'm not going to lie to you, it is a tedious application. It costs money. It requires, I think you need 2 letters from a specialist that explain your diagnosis and the fact that you were trans and that it's permanent, and you need multiple points of evidence to show that for at least, I want to say 2 years, but please do not quote me because it's been a few years since I applied for mine and I don't know if there's been any updates at all to it. But you need evidence for a certain amount of time to show that's how long you have been living as your gender full time and it's permanent and all of this stuff. There's quite a lot of steps to the process. It also feels quite vulnerable because essentially what you do is you put together this great big pack of evidence, and it's like this big kind of file of your life. Like, here's letters from doctors, here's information about surgeries I may have had, here's the hormones I'm on, here's like jobs I've had, here's like a copy of my passport, here's utility bills and other things to show you that I've changed my name in all of these different places. It's quite a lot to give away, and a panel of people then literally sit and review your evidence and decide if you have evidenced enough that you are trans for them to warrant a gender recognition certificate or for them to grant one to you. I don't want to put you off. Like this, I just want to be really honest about the process. I would absolutely take your time. I started applying years before I actually got it. So I got mine at the end of 2019, but I think I could have applied like 4 years earlier than that or something. And I started the application, I put everything together, and then by the time I was actually ready to do it, it was all outdated because I just stopped. I was a student at the time I was doing my first application and I didn't really have the money to spare to pay for it, and I just got really overwhelmed by everything I needed to provide. I very much struggled to understand what it was I had to do, feel like I should do that. I was a little bit like, I don't want to give them that feels too much. Because I went privately for hormones as well, I needed to pay to receive that letter and money again. So I put it on hold for quite a few years, and then I put in my application in 2019, and it was, for me, absolutely worth it because I was getting married. Well, I was supposed to get married the year after I got my GSC, but I ended up getting married 3 years after because of COVID. But it was absolutely worth it. It was a very emotional time, and it is important and special to me that my birth certificate says male and I'm legally recognized correctly and as who I am. It's not for everyone. It's not a necessity. You need to weigh up whether it's worth it for you to do. And I hope at some point the TAFs just are quiet long enough so that there can be a reform of the Gender Recognition Act, because it is a very long and invasive process that just is unnecessarily complicated and tedious. But if you follow the instructions, ask a friend to help you, and just do things step by step, it is absolutely manageable. And I do think that there's financial help that you can apply for as well. So if that's a concern, then have a look into that as well. But don't quote me on it. Again, it's been quite a few years since I've done it. But yes, yes, tedious, but for me personally worth it. What made you choose the type of bottom surgery you decided on? Okay, so type of bottom surgery for like trans mass people, there's 2 main types. There's phalloplasty, which is then split into different types of phallo, specifically amatoidioplasty. So phalloplasty, different types are basically where the graft comes from, like an average size penis is created from a skin graft taken typically from the forearm, but can also be taken from the thigh or the abdomen. Through other procedures, you can stand to pee through your penis and have penetrative sex and things like that with a erectile device, and it creates an averagely sized functioning penis. It is quite an intensive surgery though. It leaves like relatively large scarring in sometimes very visible places, but the results are really good. And if the pros of the outcomes of that surgery are what you want, then it's definitely something to look into. But I had metoidioplasty, which basically, I feel like I always need to keep these videos like YouTube safe, but it reworks what you've got. Testosterone causes growth down there into essentially like a micro penis, and metoidioplasty frees up things, and you can get urethral lengthening if you want. I didn't personally get it. You can get silicone testicular implants, which I did get. So like, appearance wise, penis just smaller scale. Yay. I chose to go for that one partly because I didn't care about standing to pee, which would have been my main motivation to get the other type of surgery. Wasn't that fussed on size. I wanted something that for me on my body I felt like was, I don't know how to phrase it, because this is not a negative to phalloplasty, but because metoidioplasty reworks what's already there, like for me, the appearance and things like the coloring and like just texture and everything is a lot more like natural for what would be down there, if that makes sense. But I'm not saying that phalloplasty looks unnatural. This is just a very personal preference. I still think phalloplasty results are great and they are wonderful for people that get that type of surgery. It just wasn't for me personally, and I felt like metoidioplasty would give me more the result, like closer in the results that I wanted. And there's higher risks with phalloplasty in terms of loss of sensation. It's quite rare with meta, and I didn't experience any. The biggest thing for me was the scarring. Metoidioplasty, if you get urethral lengthening, you'll have a scar in your cheek from a skin graft they use for the longer urethra. But other than that, there's like very minimal scarring down on the surgery site that is just, it's not visible anymore for me. It's so small. I personally didn't want the larger scarring that came from phalloplasty. The differences between phallo and meta in terms of the positives for phallo were not close enough, like we're just not there to outweigh the scarring for me personally. But I don't think it's a bad option at all. I always want to emphasize that this is all spoken from my personal preferences and my personal experience in my life, and is not at all a judgment on other people's choices of surgery or results. Would you suggest waiting to get tattoos until after starting T? I don't think so. Not unless you're planning on like hitting the gym and getting super duper buff, super duper fast, which I think is very difficult to do anyway. I don't think there's really any specific reason to wait. I got tattoos before T that are totally fine now, and I've had tattoos early on T that are fine now, and like very recently that are obviously still fine. The only one I would suggest is try and think as far ahead as possible in terms of surgeries that you may be after in the future if you are looking to get any surgeries. So like with phallo, you may not want to get tattoos on your forearms or thighs, because otherwise you will end up with a tattoo on your penis, or like half a tattoo on your arm and half of it on your penis. And like some people, that's totally fine. It's a vibe. There's nothing wrong with it. But if that's not what you want, then have a think about it. The other thing to consider is top surgery as well. If you want to get like a big chest piece or something in a certain area on your upper torso, maybe consider how top surgery could impact that. So I would say it's less testosterone that you need to think about when having tattoos and more surgery. So yes, that would be my advice. Have you ever used testosterone gel? Did you prefer over other methods? I do use testosterone gel. I've been on tested gel for 8 and a bit years now. So I started off on gel for the first year, and as I mentioned earlier, like my periods took a while to stop, and like changes were just, I felt a little bit slow, and I was like, so I got like my checkup after about a year. My T levels were low and I was struggling to get them higher without just taking a lot of gel. So I went on Nebido, which is a slow release type of testosterone, which is like this big thick needle, like with a really thick liquid that's injected roughly every 12 weeks. But I think it can be as frequently as 10 weeks and as far apart as 16 weeks. It just depends on how your body reacts to it. And I was on that for 3 years, and I had a lot of changes on Nebido. Period stopped. That's when my body hair and my beard started coming in, fat redistribution. But I think it was probably like There's nothing wrong with Testagel. I just didn't get my levels right during my first year. And I think I probably would have experienced a lot of those changes anyway, because a lot of them don't start happening until after the first year anyway. So the main thing for me was the periods thing. In the Libido, I honestly just got so fed up with the injection. I had a dead leg for like a day or two after I got it. It always had to be done by a nurse. I was useless at organizing getting it booked in on time. It was a real like potluck as to whether I'd get a nurse who knew how to inject it properly, because you have to like draw it in really slowly and then inject it really slowly into the butt cheek. But sometimes they did it a bit high, so it was more like around the kidney area. That's not nice. And then they did it really fast, and it's like an instant like ouchie, but my butt cheek is hurting talking about it. I just got so fed up with getting it done, and like my butt cheeks were getting scars on them where, yeah, anyway, it's a great option. It just wasn't for me. So then after 3 years on Libido, I also felt like my hair fell out faster. I don't know. I had hair loss for the 3 years I was on Libido, and I haven't had hair loss really for the last 8 years. Like everything where my hair is, that was all the 1 to 4 years on testosterone. And then since 4 years on T, my hair has pretty much stayed the same. I think there's been a little bit, but like nothing compared to those 3 years. Could also just been the time and what was going to happen anyway. But anyway, sorry, I'm really waffling about this. Then since I was 4 years on T, I've been back on gel and on a bit of a higher dose. My T levels are fine now, and I carried on getting a ton of changes. Nothing changed back. It was all fine. So yeah, I've been on gel for 8 years. Just my personal preference. I find it really easy. I shower every morning. So when I get out of the shower, I just put it on my arm and that's it. You just have to be careful with skin to skin contact with people and pets, but I just keep my arm covered, and so it's like 6 hours that transfer could happen, but you put it in the morning and then you're fine at night, and you can just like do a little wipe, like face cloth and like water, and wipe it off in the evening if you want to. I personally prefer gel over other methods, but I don't think there's one that's like generically better than another. I think it's all up to the individual. Does dysphoria ever really go away, or does it just decrease? Generally it probably is more of a decrease than a totally going away, but it depends on what it's about. So like dysphoria as a thing is still in my life, but very, very minimally. And it's about very specific things. So like before I started T, I was just dysphoric about everything to do with me. And then gradually things started calming down. Then I had top surgery and I no longer had dysphoria over my chest. And then I had lower surgery and I no longer had dysphoria over that area of myself. I'd say now like small bouts of dysphoria that can be caused by more like social things and body shape, mostly like my hip area, but it's really minimal. And even when people like try to be assholes and comment about it, I'm at a stage where I'm like, I don't care. I've seen so many cis guys that are curvier and have more hippage than me. It's just a body shape. It's not inherently feminine. It doesn't make me less of a man. It's not necessarily because I'm a trans man. It's just some guys have this body shape and there's nothing wrong with that. I would say dysphoria has almost gone away. And the way I like to describe it is my dysphoria is now a grain of sand compared to the entire beach that it used to be. It can, but it depends on the individual. So that's just my experience. Do you adapt the pronouns of a song to match with yours when you sing? No, probably not. It's probably something I would have done in the beginning. But like I listened to... like there's a Shania Twain that's like, man, I feel like a woman. I will sing along to that. It doesn't mean anything. It's a song. I'm not singing about myself. If you want to, you can. I find it weird when people do like professional covers of songs, like other artists cover a song and they change the pronouns because they're like, I can't sound gay. I find that a bit bizarre. But if it causes you dysphoria, then there's nothing wrong with like if you're singing in your head or whatever, or you know, you're just singing to change the pronouns. I personally don't. I don't think I have. I maybe did a bit in the beginning. I don't remember, but definitely not something I do now. And finally, a very fitting question for the end. Would you consider your transition over? So to wrap up the video, would I consider my transition wrapped up? Yes. The way I see it is I will always be trans, but I am no longer actively transitioning. I have taken all of the trans related steps in my life that I want to. The end for me was when I got my GRC and I felt all like content and stuff. But I think like that's like trans related transition. I think we're always like in a state of transitioning throughout our entire lives, but trans specifically, yeah, it's over. Like I'm still getting hairier, but I just kind of see that as an aging process, not a transitioning process in the trans sense. But I will always be transgender, even though I'm no longer actively transitioning. So when I got my birth certificate, my gender recognition certificate, my birth certificate in the post, I got really emotional because it felt to me, I physically felt lighter, and I felt like that's it. Like, I am done. I don't need to worry about this stuff anymore. There's nothing active that I want to carry on pursuing. I'm finished. My transition is over. That's very much how I felt. Not everyone will feel that way. Again, different strokes for different folks and all of that stuff. But yes, I personally do feel like my transition is over. Yay! How did we like this video? Was that useful? Please let me know down in the comments below. It's been a while since I've done a Q&A helpful type video like this, so I really hope that it was useful and I gave some good answers through all the waffle. Go comment down below. Go follow me on Instagram, because then if I do something like this in the future, you'll be able to see the story and ask a question if you want to have something answered. And yeah, if you did like it, then I'm very happy to do more in the future, because this was not an exhaustive list of questions that could be answered around being trans and transitioning. So yeah, very happy to come back in the future with another one. And yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Oh, think about giving a thumbs up and subscribing if you want to, but no pressure, and much love. Bye.